A French aristocrat named Gilles de Rais killed more than 100 children before being jailed and put to death on October 26, 1440. Because of the bad things he did, the dark French fairy tale Bluebeard was based on him. In that story, a nobleman uses his power and status to seduce and kill several women. In the story, the bad guy's seventh and final wife finds a room full of the bodies of people Bluebeard has killed and cut up. She can get away with the help of her brother and even marry her Prince Charming. It's too bad that the story's historical background is much darker. The real Gilles de Rais didn't leave so much proof out in the open. Instead, he burned the kids' bodies and spread their ashes all over his huge estate. The man used to be friends with Joan of Arc and a French hero, so how did he turn into a child killer? Perhaps more importantly, should we believe everything we hear about him? Gilles de Rais had a troubling childhood. It makes sense to start our look at Gilles de Rais's life with his youth, since he was exposed to death and tragedy at a very young age. When he was only 10 years old, he saw his father die when a wild boar bit him while they were hunting. After only a few months, his mother passed away. Gilles de Rais became an orphan all of a sudden, which gave him a huge farm and made him a powerful French noble. The bad thing was that he had to live with his cruel grandfather, Jean de Craon. There are no ways to know what kind of effect Gilles de Rais's rough childhood had on him as a child, but there are signs that he was already beginning to act in horrible ways. If his court testimony is to be believed, he spent much of his time alone as a child, leading to many opportunities in which he pleased himself with every illicit act and did whatever evil he could. Regardless of the emotional pain Gilles de Rais may have been through, there is no question that he was spoiled in many ways. He changed into a vain and cruel boy in just a few years. This boy was also a fighter with a sword. He learned how to fight quickly, and by the time he was 15, he had already killed someone. Gilles de Rais didn't have a long childhood. He quickly moved on to the next part of his life when, at age 17, he married Catherine de Thouars of Brittany. Everything about their marriage was bad from the start. Gilles de Rais seems to have been homosexual for a while, and it took him and Catherine 7 years to have a kid. Gilles de Rais left his wife and new baby right after they were born and never came back. Becoming a hero. One thing Gilles de Rais was good at was fighting and killing. He may not have been a good parent. Before he went to live in the country and started killing people, Gilles de Rais was known for being a brave soldier in the 100 Years' War. He played a key role in the war by being with Joan of Arc during the Siege of Orleans. It's not clear what his friendship with Joan of Arc was like or if they were connected in any way other than fighting together. But because of how well he did in battle, they broke an English siege that had been going on for months in just 8 days. He was made Marshal of France, which is the greatest military honor a French noble could receive. Gilles de Rais and his crimes. If Gilles de Rais had a career high point, it would be when he helped Joan of Arc during the 100 Years' War. On the other hand, her death set him on a downward spiral that would end with his brutal killing spree and hanging in 1440. Court records show that between 1432, a year after Joan's death, and 1440, Gilles de Rais abducted, raped, and killed more than 100 children in a planned way. But it wasn't until he beat up a priest in September of that year that someone spoke out against his crimes. When the first people who came forward to charge the French nobleman told the same story, their sons had gone missing in or near La Suze, which is one of Gilles de Rais's properties. Many of these kids had spent time with de Rais. One of them even said he was made to drink white wine during one of his trips. We don't know what happened to these boys, but the many stories that came after paint a pretty clear picture of how de Rais worked. To begin with, he wasn't acting by himself. Several people worked for him and helped him find and kill his victims. Their damning confessions say that these servants would search the area for young boys that they could take from their parents. They did this by telling the boys that de Rais's fancy castle would be a better place for them to live and learn. Some parents even offered to give up their kids because they thought the rich nobleman could teach them well. Over time, the parents would have started to wonder what happened to their lost kids. what they didn't know about the truly horrible end that their children met until the trial in 1440. There was one very evil way that Gilles de Rais killed his victims over and over again. It was something he did to keep them from making noise, to prevent their cries, and so that they would not be heard. The said Gilles de Rais sometimes hung them by his own hand, sometimes had others suspend them by the neck with ropes or cords on a peg or a small hook in his room. Then he let them down, or had them let down, cajoled them, assuring them that he did not want to hurt them or do them harm, that, on the contrary, it was to have fun with them, and to this end, he prevented them from crying out. He would then take out his penis and masturbate on their bellies while their necks held them up. After he was done with them, he would either cut off their heads, slit their throats, or break their necks to finish them off. A worker of de Rais said that the king seemed to really enjoy killing people. He would sometimes slit the boys' throats and then sit on their bellies to watch them die. This way of killing kids didn't make it clear how many were killed. One of his workers thought there were 36 to 46 victims, but other people thought there were much more than 100, maybe even as many as 600. When Gilles de Rais was put on trial in 1440, he had already been doing horrible things for years. The trial and execution of Gilles de Rais. It might seem odd that Gilles de Rais was first charged with attacking a priest instead of the cruel killings that many peasants said he was responsible for, but in the late Middle Ages, lords had a level of privilege that kept peasants from saying bad things about them. It's tempting to think that Gilles de Rais might not have been punished for his crimes if he had never hit the royal priest. But the way things turned out, de Rais died pretty quickly. He had no way out because there was so much proof against him. He also didn't try to deny the claims. Instead, he answered each of the judges' questions with dramatic emotion because he liked the theatre. When the judges pressed him about his motives for killing, Gilles de Rais at one point shouted, "Alas, Monseigneur, you torment yourself and me along with you. Truly there was no other cause, no other end or intention. I've told you greater things than this, and enough to kill 10,000 men." In the end, on October 26th, 1440, Gilles de Rais was hanged along with 2 slaves who had helped kill their master's victims. The people were put to death by being burned, and the ashes were thrown away. It looked like the right thing was done, but was Gilles de Rais truly guilty? Gilles de Rais's contested history. It's hard to come to any other opinion after reading the trial transcripts than that Gilles de Rais was a psychopath who killed many people. But some writers have said that his trial wasn't really fair. One thing is that after Gilles de Rais died, the Duke of Brittany, who had been in charge of the secular part of the trial, legally took over his properties. In the very least, that is a clear case of self-interest. Or it could show that the trial was a planned plot to take Gilles de Rais' land. Other historians say that de Rais was not guilty because of how courts worked in the Middle Ages. Back then, people were tortured in many horrible ways to get them to confess. As Gilles de Rais sat in front of the judges, the thought of being tortured would have been on his mind. He may have admitted just to avoid being tortured or being kicked out of the church, which would have been a worse punishment. In 1992, a judge came to this conclusion when a French arbitration court made up of lawyers, historians, and politicians chose to hold a rehabilitation trial to find out if the first trial had wrongly found him guilty of his crimes. One thing that worked in his favor was that no dead children were ever found in his houses, and he only admitted to the crimes after being warned that he would be kicked out of the church. We might never know what Gilles de Rais was really like or what crimes he is said to have committed, but that won't stop scholars from looking into this vague part of French medieval history.